Egg.
Thanks. Thanks for the invitation.
All right. Let's admit people in.
All right.
Good luck,
I'll admit.
Kim. Enjoy.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome to Philosophy Hub Research University, your ultimate guide on your next research project. We will lay down the best practices in research ideation, literature review, experimental design, and data analysis to guide you as you carry out your research project. Learn from the Philosophy Hub team of research scientists and some invited subject matter experts. Philosophy Hub Research University will be your personal coach through every stage of your research project, from ideation to final assessment. And the best part, it's absolutely free. Visit us at philscihub.com and be part of this learning journey. Let's learn and succeed together here at Philosophy Hub Research University. Welcome to Philosophy Hub Research University, your ultimate guide on your next research project. We will lay down the best practices in research ideation, literature review, experimental design, and data analysis to guide you as you carry out your research project. Learn from the Philosophy Hub team of research scientists and some invited subject matter experts. Philosophy Hub Research University will be your personal coach through every stage of your research project, from ideation to final assessment. And the best part, it's absolutely free. Visit us at philscihub.com and be part of this learning journey. Let's learn and succeed together here at Philosophy Hub Research University.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Welcome to the Filipino Science Hub. Thank you for your continued support to this online platform. To our new participants, thank you for checking us out today, and we would like to officially welcome you to the Philosophy Hub family. So bago po tayo magsimula, I would like to share some house rules in order to facilitate a smooth session for everyone. For our Zoom participants, we would appreciate it if you could turn your audio and video cameras off during the webinar. If you have questions or comments, feel free to type them on our Zoom chat box or YouTube live comments, and we will try to accommodate as much questions and comments as possible. After the talk, we will have a 30-minute Q&A where the Zoom participants will have the opportunity to ask their questions live. We would also like to request for everyone to not record the webinar. The full video of the session will be posted on our official YouTube channel. For those who would like to receive a certificate of participation, a Google form link will be posted on our Zoom chat box, YouTube live comments, and YouTube video description towards the end of the webinar. Please make sure that you enter the correct information, especially your email address, to ensure receipt of the certificate. Also, for you to obtain the certificate, you will need to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as follow our page on Facebook. Please note that we receive hundreds of requests and it takes around 7 days or so to process all the certificates. If you do not receive your certificate after a week, please feel free to send us a message on Facebook or email us at philscihub@gmail.com. So again, welcome po sa Philosophy Hub. Welcome to all our Zoom participants and our YouTube live viewers. For those who are new and may not be familiar with who we are and what we do, allow me to share our mission and vision in the next few minutes. Filipino Science Hub is an online platform founded by our CEO, Filipino scientist Dr. Jeffrey Camacho Bungkin, back in 2012. Currently, we are a registered nonprofit organization based in Houston, Texas, United States. Our mission is to promote STEM education and the culture of research among students and teachers in the Philippines and abroad. Our current global leadership team is comprised of volunteer Filipino scientists and seasoned STEM educators from different parts of the world. Our vision is to see a technology and innovation-driven Philippines, and we believe that this can be achieved by creating a new generation of well-rounded Filipino STEM enthusiasts. This vision is being carried out via our two major programs, the PhilSci Hub Ed program and PhilSci Hub Research University. Through PhilSci Hub Ed, we are able to empower and support our teachers when it comes to strengthening STEM fundamentals education. We believe that this is important because the more equipped our STEM educators are, the more they can inspire our students to pursue a career in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Through this program, we have been able to serve our teachers by creating STEM teaching modules as well as conducting teachers training webinars, all of which are accessible on our website for free. So we have also been able to collaborate with major educational organizations that have the same goals and advocacies as Filipino Science Hub. Through these partnerships, we have been able to further expand our reach and help more students and teachers, especially during the time of pandemic. So together, everybody achieves more. The other major program that drives our vision forward is PhilSci Hub Research University. We believe that in order to strengthen a STEM culture, students also need to be able to learn how to conduct a scientific research. As we know, many scientific and technological breakthroughs happened through research, and we would like to equip our younger generation by providing them proper scientific research training. So ika nga po, start them young. Here at PhilSci Hub Research University, we provide free courses on fundamentals of scientific research, such as research ideation, literature review, how to write a research proposal, how to communicate your research work to the scientific community, among other courses. Through this program, we are also able to bring practicing scientists closer to the STEM educational sector. So because of this closer contact, our students become more aware of the possible STEM career paths available for them and how these careers contribute to the advancement of the society around them. So up to date, we have been able to reach over 70,000 students and teachers all over the world. And we know that this will continue to grow in the years to come. And this is why we are all very excited on what is in store here at PhilSci Hub. Our official website is www.philscihub.com. This is where you can access all our materials such as webinars, tutorials, modules, virtual lab, and special features. We are also present in several social media platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. So follow us wherever you're most active on to get updated with our web events. So again, thank you for being with us this morning. And to officially start our webinar, I would like to turn the virtual floor over to our host for today.
All right, magandang umaga po sa lahat ng participants natin here on Zoom and those who are also tuning in from YouTube. We have a physics web lecture today, and we have invited a very special guest from Boston, Massachusetts, Dr. Kimberly Reichel-Vischi. And let me just share our slides. Okay. So our web lecture today is titled 3D Mapping with Airborne Lidar. And I don't have any idea on what this is, but our guest will surely enlighten us everything about airborne lidar. And she is Dr. Kimberly Reichel-Vischi, a lidar scientist at 3DAO Inc. At Boston, Massachusetts in USA. So again, good morning, everybody here on Zoom and on YouTube. So to introduce our speaker, she is a lidar scientist, as I've said, at this company called 3DAO Inc. at Boston, Massachusetts, and she finished her PhD in applied physics at Rice University and did postdoctoral research at Brown University and at Concilio Nazionale delle Ricerche in 2019. This is in Pisa, Italy. And she finished her bachelor's degree in physics and mathematics at the University of Miami because she's originally from Florida, and did masteral studies in applied physics at Rice University in 2013. Her research interest obviously is in physics, but her research is focused now on terahertz science and applications such as active waveguide devices based on electronically reconfigurable liquid metals, quantum cascade lasers, and extreme sublength terahertz imaging using scattering types, scanning near field optical microscopy. So they're braining terms here. And yeah, and we're very excited and pleasured. We're very honored to be in the presence of Dr. Kimberly Reichel-Vischi. Hi, Kim. Good evening there in Boston.
Hello, everyone.
So, yep, I think we're now ready. If you could share your slides, I'll stop sharing at this point.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. It's more than I was thinking, and I'm just really happy and excited to be here and definitely encouraged by what you all are doing. And so I wish I could see all of the students, all the participants, all your faces, face to face. But this is definitely the next best thing. And maybe something good that's happened out of the pandemic is more opportunities to connect like this. So thank you for the invitation. I do hope you learned something. I hope I have something to share, and I'm looking forward probably mostly to the questions at the end, because that's, I think, where a lot of beneficial things can happen. So I'm going to do technical stuff and a little bit of physics, hopefully parts that you can understand, and also share a little bit about my career journey to start with. I've been involved in the past with a very similar organization to you guys, in particular to optics and photonics. And so I need to give a big shout out and thanks to them. Through the OSA, the Optics Society of America, I did a lot of outreach and things like this, and even prepared kind of talks like this, have talked a lot about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a super good, helpful book. So
yeah, I read that too.
It's good. And do you live by it is the question. And then also, we never do anything alone. And I like to start with who are the people that I work with that I can thank that were contributors to the work that I'm doing. So my current company is on the left. It's a lot of family and accountants you see there. We're actually just 7 people. The company I'm with is a very small startup. And a lot of the work and the preliminary examples of this airborne LiDAR mapping was done at MIT Lincoln Labs. So I also want to give a shout out to them. So I'm going to start with the career part, which maybe is most interesting, and maybe the physics is not so interesting to you guys. But this graphic, I think, really describes the truth of reality. That success, we often think, is this linear line. You start at one place and you go tick, 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 and you end up in a linear way to whatever you think success is. But unfortunately, it's not a straight line. And this picture on the right, I think, is way more accurate about what actually happens in life. And I know myself and other friends through school, once you start going a trajectory and think, wait, I'm falling off this line, you think your life is over, your career is over. No, you're just finding another way to go. And it is going to be all over the place. And hopefully you end up in somewhere that is success, which can be defined so many different ways. And each person has their different definition of what success is. So I hope everybody here that you can find it. And when you're in the twists and turns, to not be discouraged and just keep, as long as you keep momentum going, I think you'll end up in a good place. Another thing that I think has been really helpful is to find your purpose, which seems like a very big, like unattainable thing. But I love this Venn diagram, which overlaps 4 different ideas. I'm not sure if you can see the mouse as a pointer. I hope so.
Yep, I see.
We do.
Good. So if you can identify 4 things and 4 things that overlap, then I think you can find your purpose. And the first of that is what you do well. So things that you're good at, and also what you love to do, the things that you're passionate about, the things that you are excited to wake up and get out of bed in the morning, or like JP, excited to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning to be here with us. And then if you can find that intersection with what the world needs, hopefully you're doing something useful for society. And then maybe for some people, the most important, or some people, the least important. It's good to find something also that intersects with this, that the world will pay for, that you can have a career and be paid to live. So if you can identify these 4 areas in your life, maybe you have a long list in each one of those circles, but then look at what's the common thing in each of these. Then I think you can live a fulfilled and purpose-filled life. So kind of going back to the idea of life is very highly nonlinear. I'm going to share my nonlinear trajectory. So I'm originally from South Florida, and I love South Florida because we have a little bit of every culture, including Filipinos, which I love. So when I was choosing to go to college, University of Miami is a very good school, pretty close by to my family. I thought that's a nice place to go. And I actually applied to the music school. I play piano and my parents are musicians. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do music. And through a series of events and that particular day of when I had my audition, it was just awful. Like my playing on the audition was like worse than like practice at home on the worst day. And it just felt like, okay, this wasn't good. Like what happened and why? And I was very discouraged. But the school said back, well, you didn't pass on your audition, but you're a very good student. Like you have good grades. Would you consider another major? And so I said, well, math and music always went along to me. And I said, okay, well, I'll study mathematics. And so here was like the first major. I thought I was going to go this way and that door was closed. Let me go this other direction, completely different. And in retrospect, I'm very thankful now that I went that path. So I didn't study music, I studied math. And then from that, kind of, with math, I always loved space and space science. I loved NASA, and there was a particular internship program, and I applied the first time, I was denied. I applied the second time and I was accepted. So another example of, I thought there was a closed door, but then there was another opportunity. And here's where I started working with electromagnetism. I was working with antennas and modeling where to put antennas made out of fabric, say, for example, onto an astronaut suit. And what are the antenna performance. So that was a really awesome opportunity. And I love Houston as a city, which I'll get back to. So I tend to like visit places multiple times. And so finished school back in Miami, but as you already heard in my bio, I went back to Houston to Rice University for my master's and PhD. And that's where I met Dindy when she was studying in Houston as well. And this picture, this is definitely what it feels like when you're in graduate school. Like, what the heck am I doing? And what did I get myself into? And why does anybody even care about this topic? But this is where I worked in terahertz. So I won't spend a lot of time here. It's the band of frequencies between microwave and infrared. And there hasn't been a lot done into it. So there's, it's really a fruitful field. It's going to be the next 6G or 7G in terms of wireless communications. So I was working on devices to be able to guide those waves in different kinds of ways. And during that time, I got the chance to go to Denmark and Copenhagen, which was a great experience to live in another country, in another culture. And I think anybody and everybody, especially Americans, we can be kind of closed off from the rest of the world. It's really important to be able to experience other cultures. So very thankful for the work that I was able to do there, continuing stuff with terahertz waveguides, but also culturally as well. And then, okay, visiting places multiple times, back to Houston to finish my PhD work with other kinds of devices. And then my boss had said, hey, I got a new professor position in the Northeast. Will you go with me? And I am from Florida. I love Houston. I love the heat, the humidity, all that sort of stuff. I never wanted to be where it was cold, but yet here it was, you know, yet another kink in my journey of, wait, I don't want to live in the snow. And I ended up coming to the Northeast and moving with my professor to Brown University. And it was a nice opportunity to be able to come up with my own ideas and be able to implement that, in this case, electrically reconfigurable liquid metals in these terahertz devices. So moving on from there, yet another cultural experience. This I worked also in terahertz, but in a different sense of making terahertz lasers, quantum cascade lasers, and also near field optical imaging. So you have a very, very sharp point that's maybe 50, 100 nanometers at the point. And even though our terahertz wavelengths are in the hundreds of microns, we can still image at, say, the 100 nanometer level. So it's a really incredible technology in terms of the nano imaging that you can do. Anyway, so that was that experience there. And this is where I met my now husband. So I'm super thankful for that. And as my position was finishing there, I applied to jobs. Really, it could have been anywhere in the world, but happened to end up back over here in the cold Northeast, not Providence, in Boston, so slightly north of where I was before. And this is where I am now for the last 2 years. So a couple takeaways besides just seeing my journey and the trajectory that I was on. I was first told no to something I thought I really wanted to do. And one of the takeaways that I want to impart to you, don't let a no slow you down. Just find another way or find another avenue to travel and go down. The other takeaway, similar, applying for this, the internship that I really wanted to do. Again, it was a no, but then applied again and was accepted. So again, you know, just keep moving forward. The other thing, besides not letting no's slow you down, is saying yes to opportunities that you could have. I never wanted to live in the snow, but I said yes to that. You know, I sacrificed something and left my friends, my family, everything. Yeah. And it was worth it. And the yes to go to Denmark, to Italy, and going to Italy, finding my now love. I mean, that's priceless. So in all areas of life, okay, you shouldn't say yes to absolutely everything, but I would say most things that are presented to you, especially in terms of career, take those opportunities when they come to you. And it's awesome that you're involved with such a group like this that's going to be showing you and connecting you to such other opportunities like that.
You've actually shared like some very strong and encouraging messages, Kim. So thank you so much for that. And I to all the members of the audience, I think Dr. Kim's story is very consistent with the saying that says, fortune favors the brave. Like when opportunities present themselves, you have to make the jump. You have to be ready to make the jump. So thank you.
Yep.
Absolutely. So before I transition, just want to remind you of this graphic again, just because it's so good. This is actually what success is. So now,
for most people.
yeah, that's the other thing too. We think it's a myth. The people that we see as successful in life, we think, oh, they ended up from here to here. All the people you see that are successful all had their own crazy journey.
There are detours here and there. So, and I think, it's a very important point that you raised, like things that you guys see on social media, you only see mostly, like the good parts of people's stories. But, I think everyone can relate to Kim's story. So.
Yeah. And even now on the technical side, I shared some pictures and quick graphics of what I've done. Technically, I've changed kind of directions. It's always, kind of been funneling in from math to physics to antennas and RF to terahertz. Now I'm in the near infrared. So all those past experiences, they build on each other. And you bring a certain mindset to this other field that the other people there might not necessarily have. So it's a benefit as well. So the work I'm doing now is, for me, super exciting. And I'm still amazed that this stuff exists at all. So I'm going to start with a video. Again, my company that I'm with, the small startup of 7 people that we are, is 3DEO, stands for three-dimensional electro-optics. In partnership with people who fly airplanes. But basically, we put our sensor on an airplane, we fly around and look at the ground, shining our laser light, and we take 3-dimensional maps. So I'm going to show you one example here. Say there's a region of interest, somebody really wants to know what's happening here. So we fly by this, what I'm going to show, we fly and we look and we scan on the ground, and in a very short amount of time, we get very highly detailed information. So for here, there's a couple water towers, one's under construction. We see power lines. This is taken from 10,000 feet in the air, so really high up there. I zoom in on some of those power lines, but the most powerful thing about this kind of LiDAR imaging is that we can penetrate through the trees and the foliage, and we can digitally deforest in the post-processing and pull back the trees and see what is the actual ground underneath the trees. So here you see, like, the black is a water reservoir. You see the stream that goes across here in a foot trail even. And just to remind you, if you were to just take a photograph, I'll go back and stop on this image. If you were to just take a photograph of this area, all you would see is the treetops. And so we're going to talk a little bit more in depth how we actually see past the trees or underneath the trees. But this is the general idea of what we're doing. So say there's a piece of land you want to see. What do you need to do to make that happen? I'm going to start with kind of a general overview, and we'll get a little deeper and deeper. But basically, we shine a pulse of light out, and we have a timer that says when that pulse went out. We see that light will reflect out everywhere, and we're going to collect back with our camera onto our focal plane array that image. And with that timing that it took and with where we were looking in space, we can make this geolocated 3D image. And just a couple quick numbers off the bat, just so you get a feel. From 20,000 feet in the sky, so that's like 7,000 meters, 7,000 meters, we get a resolution of 10 centimeters. We can see 2 points apart from each other from that high in the sky. And the ranging in terms of the Z, it depends on our timing, and that's about 15 centimeters resolution in the Z. And often we do this at night, so we don't have background light from the sun. We're working at near infrared wavelengths. So we fly at night, and we have less background signal. Some of the disadvantages right off the bat, if there's clouds, the near infrared, it will be absorbed or reflected or completely scattered by the clouds. And we are doing it active, so meaning you only get as much light as you shine down. And as I said, it's better at nighttime to avoid any sunlight background. So some more pretty examples just to get you a feeling of what the kind of data is that we get. This is the MIT campus, so here in Boston. And for me, every time I see these images, it's just incredible the amount of detail. And this is a point cloud, meaning that everything you see, it's just one little dot. And we're actually measuring individual photons that we then clump together in the processing here. But like a picture, you're kind of limited by the pixels that you see in like a camera picture. And so here we're actually looking at individual photons and then combining them, like grouping them together to say, yes, there was a surface here. And continuing on, these are some of the early demonstrations of this. There's a zoom in here of one of the space shuttles, and you can even see the ropes tying it down. Some other nice examples. This is one of the early testbed systems, alert. And this is the Grand Canyon. And so time on station was 80 minutes to collect this kind of big area, 11 kilometers by 5 kilometers. And the Grand Canyon has a relief, so from top to bottom of like 1.5 kilometers. And zooming in on one of those areas, it's just really striking the amount of detail that you get. So this is another example, and this is something I saw before I joined this company, and I said, yeah, whatever that is, I want to be part of that. This is going to be Lidar Imagery of Boston, and they collected this data in 6 passes, but the actual recording time was 10 seconds each. So imagine, so it takes longer to turn around the airplane than anything else, but 60 seconds of data is what you see here. So this is downtown Boston. It's colored by height. So the more orange is the more higher it is, the more blue and purple, the lower in the Z dimension. And 60 seconds of data gets you this entire area at this level of detail. What's great is between these very tall buildings, you still see the street level between the buildings. You have a lot of detail about the bridges and that kind of structure. This is the State House. You can see the flags on the flagpoles here. Wherever there's something dark, that's either where we didn't get any light reflected back or it was shadowed by something else. This is kind of going along the roadway here. You can see the signs. And then I love this historical ship that we have here in Boston Harbor. You can see the ropes even between the masts. And again, getting to that idea of the very narrow corridors, we can see the street and everything in very narrow fields of view.
And this was gathered for 60 seconds.
Yeah, 60 seconds of data. It took longer to fly around each line. And we fly different lines to avoid some of the shadowing that you might see. So what does it take to actually do this? So we'll get into a little bit more of the details in here. But you need, for this kind of mapping, an airplane. Some people are doing drones to do LiDAR mapping, but drones are much more limited in how far they can go and how long they can travel. So if you want to do big maps of areas or go somewhere far away, that's hard to do with just a drone. In terms of the optics, you need a pulse laser. In this case, we're using a camera that's a single photon detector. I'll talk more about that in detail. Then you also need to know where you are in space and where you're looking in space. So that's our positioning units, the GPS, a global positioning system, and IMU stands for inertial measurement unit. You need the scanning mirror. And then also in terms of the computer side, you need lots of data storage because we get a lot of data really quick. It's like a gigabyte per second of data is typically what we're working with. And then also a lot of compute power to make sense of all of the data that you get and make those beautiful maps that you saw. So from all of these topics that it's essential, it requires expertise in a lot of different areas in aeronautics and working the airplane and how you can fly an airplane. It requires expertise in optical physics, which was kind of my entry point into this, the system engineering, and then the data processing and the compute power. So more and more, just everything in our 21st century. It's not, you can have expertise in one area, but you have to at least be able to talk to the people in a coherent way, to be able to understand what they're doing and really interface together. So now kind of going component by component, this again is an example of ALERT, the Airborne Lidar Imaging Research Testbed. This was done at Lincoln Laboratory, which is at MIT. So in your airplane, you need a hole in the bottom of your plane so you can actually shine your light out. So there's a hole with a window. And then inside the plane, you have your optical bench, which is, I'll show a little bit more of the optics in a bit, but connected to that optical bench is a scanning mirror. So you can scan wherever you want on the ground. You need the GPS, the antenna, to tell where you are in space, and the inertial measurement unit to tell you how are you positioned at this moment in time. This is a little bit a picture of that mirror. And then the actual LiDAR package. And I guess back up, LiDAR, it's kind of a play off of radar, which was radio, distance, and ranging, but LiDAR is light, distance, and ranging. So that's what the acronym LiDAR stands for. And so inside our LiDAR package, we have our laser source, which is a pulse of light. And then we have our optics, some lenses, and some fold mirrors. And then we have our camera. In this case, this single photon detecting camera is a Geiger Mode avalanche photo detector. I'll go into a little bit more of the physics there just because it's cool. And that's what really enables this kind of LiDAR to happen from so high in the sky. And then some onboard processing. So some computers next to real time that can make sense of what you're seeing and making sure you're scanning the right area. So to break it down one level more before we expand back out, the really basic physics level of LiDAR. So say you have some kind of object and you want to know what its structure or what its surface is. So the couple components I mentioned before, you need a pulsed laser and a camera. In addition to that, they need to be connected to some kind of timer. And this line will be tracking time for us. So at one instant of time, T0, the pulse of light is sent out by the laser. Now it's going to hit the target object and it will reflect off. And there's different ways that surfaces reflect or scatter light or absorb light even. But often the reflected light is kind of a big cone out all over the place. And some of that reflected light is going to come back to our camera. And when the camera detects this signal, the camera on our timeline says, hey, TOF stands for time of flight. It says, hey, I got a signal back. And so based on the time the light left and when the camera got the light back, we can learn something about the distance. But what is the formula to relate something traveling and something in time? Well, I hope this is Physics 101 or earlier. Velocity is distance over time. This is at the heart of LiDAR, and it's not complicated, just distance over time. So what we want, the unknown variable is the distance. How far from our system, say our pulse laser and camera are very close together and the object's far away, 20,000 feet away. So what is this distance here? Well, we know what the velocity is, the speed of light. It's 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. Now it's impacted by the refractive index of air and that kind of stuff, but okay, 3 times 10 to the 8, that's the speed of light. We know the time that it took for the light to go because we got the signal from the camera that said, hey, I got a signal. That's the TOF, the time of flight. So now the distance, it's not just from where you are to the object, it's the round trip distance because the light had to leave the laser, go to the object, and come back to us. So it's actually 2 times this capital D distance. And if you just rewrite and solve this equation for distance, you get out the distance of how far an object is away is the speed of light times your time of flight, the time length that it took divided by 2. So I hope it seems simple because it is simple. It's just Physics 101, but it's complicated to make it happen. That's for sure. But the idea is straightforward. So to show this same concept in a more pictorial kind of way, and in the kind of imaging we're doing, we're thinking about single photons. So say from our airplane, we're going to shine out a single photon down to the ground. And this is North End, the kind of downtown of Boston. Now, okay, we never send out just one photon. It's always a lot, and the light's going to go everywhere. But just imagine just one of those photons hits the ground and reflects back up in the same way. And we're keeping track of the timing. What's the math? So we just went through this on the other page. The round trip distance is 2 times the distance from the plane to the ground. We know the speed of light. And what's the time of flight that the camera will have seen? What's the time scale? So if we're flying at 20,000 feet, it's like 6 kilometers. We know the speed of light. So what is this? 2 times D over C. We've got our 12 kilometers for our distance divided by the speed of light. And so you end up with 40 microseconds is how long it takes a single photon of light to travel to the ground 6 kilometers and back. So our timer, we have to say to the timer, okay, you start the time and then 40 microseconds later is when you get something back. And now what about the resolution of, say, seeing the top of the building to the ground or kind of on the finer time scale? So here's kind of a cartoon zoom in. So our range resolution, say from the top of something to the next closest surface, what can you actually resolve? And that depends on how closely in time can you measure? What is the smallest subdivision you can do? And typically we can get to about half a nanosecond. And so 1 nanosecond, in that amount of time, light will travel 15 centimeters. So that means we can just, if our timer is good enough to 1 nanosecond, then we can detect objects that are 15 centimeters apart in the range dimension. So that's kind of all the main physics that goes into doing LiDAR And now to kind of start to peel back out to the bigger systems levels with maybe a couple other details. Here's some photos. This is again of the alert system. So, a plane is kind of small inside, and this first initial system really took up the whole width of the plane. And you see these guys working back there, very cramped together. This is the whole LiDAR package with the hole in the bottom of the plane. And then over here on the right, the guy is working on the data. And then continuing with the optics, the laser. So I love this graphic. I won't go into all the details here. Thor Labs is a great company selling optical components, and they made this little graph, which is great. But most of the time we don't think about continuous wave light, not pulse light. So what's novel about this is that this is actually what's happening. You get like a disk of light, and it's spaced out in time. And this is super important for LiDAR imaging, because if you had a constant light source, you don't know if you're seeing light that came from 5 seconds ago or 20 seconds ago. So by having a pulse of light, we know when the pulse left, and we know when that pulse will comes back, when it comes back. And then with the camera, with the detector, so this is something novel, innovated and developed at MIT Lincoln Lab. And this is this Geiger Mode APD. So Geiger, you might have heard with radiation counting, and Geiger, who worked on that scientist, basically having individual radioactive particles, he was able to count those. So we're in this kind of system, we kind of took the name Geiger because we're able to count individual photons. A little bit of time, if anybody, it seemed like there's a lot of, I know some of you guys who I know are in the chemical side or material side.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd spend just a minute on this, because this is really the key enabling technology for what we're doing. So the camera, it's made of pixels. It's not very many pixels, but they're very sensitive pixels. So it's 32 by 128 in this particular example. And you have the light that hits this, it's an avalanche photodiode, and behind each pixel is a CMOS digital timing circuit. So in this way, every pixel, once it's hit by a photon, it gets assigned the time of flight that I showed in kind of a few slides ago. Each photon gets its individual timestamp of when it arrived. And that's why we can tell, okay, this one arrived at 40 microseconds and of 2 nanoseconds versus 40 microseconds and 5 nanoseconds, and us be able to tell those surfaces apart. So one more bit on the material side of things. We have indium phosphide substrate, and that has the photons coming in. And then we have this multiplier region in which the avalanche happens. So like an avalanche is, you have a snowball and just, it kind of grows. So from one photon, it excites a bunch of electrons, and one of those gets through and then is detected here. And this is a CMOS individual behind it that gives the timestamp when it detects one photon coming in. So the last graphic, and then we get back to more cool pictures. The whole Geiger Mode thing is we operate the avalanche photodiode above its breakdown voltage. And when you're doing that, when it's hit by just one photon, it pulls down, and that's how we can measure the state change. And so I should have numbers off the top of my head, but like it's one photon is like super, super, super tiny. I mean, a flashlight's emitting like millions of photons, like a nanosecond or something. So it's really remarkable, the ability to measure just one photon.
That's
and that's
really high
why,
sensitivity.
yes. So that's why we can be so high in the sky, shine our light down, and still be able to measure the little bit of reflection that comes back.
Wow.
So moving on from there, the other important section I said was about system engineering. So you have your airplane in your city you're looking down on. Well, you need to know where you're looking. So say you have your mirrors that can look any like plus minus 20 degrees. And when you're recording your data, when your photon hits your camera and you give it a timestamp, you need to know at this timestamp, where was I looking? In which direction was I looking? How was my bench bent at all? And where am I in space? So the GPS tells you where you are in space. IMU tells you your current orientation. And the angle of the mirror, it's basically ray tracing optics. If I have my mirror at this, then I know where I was looking at the ground was exactly this geo position on the Earth. And so with these things combined, that's how we can say, usually if we use some ground truth in our measurements, we can be accurate as close to 10 centimeters from 20,000 feet in the sky. We can say, yes, for sure, this point came from this place on the Earth within an uncertainty of 10 centimeters. So it's really incredibly accurate. So to get more into kind of some of the other videos and to show in particular the scanning, something our company has done, Cuchillo is the name of one of our sensors. It means little knife because we're cutting through the trees. We're using a flexible scanning system that allows us to see features of interest, not just circles or squares. And so here we're interested in the airport and everything around here. And then we neck down into, say, something else like this power line. So here's the airport. You do see color intensity. So it's single photon, but we're measuring how much light we send out and how much light we get back. So we get a relative intensity. So here we follow a roadway along, and then we decide, okay, we want to actually scan and now focus in on these power lines that are nearby. And again, these water towers that are maybe familiar from the other video I showed you, we've flown out of this airport a lot, so we have a lot of imagery of here, but we have the power lines with pretty clear individuality between them. And then we neck over to this substation that's here, and just the accuracy and precision. For me, it still amazes me. So going on, now we're getting to the point of the processing. We have our photons that are time-stamped and we know where they were looking in space, but how do you make sense of them all? So we have different levels of the data. So the lowest level is the raw data. It's the camera measurements and the position of the plane, the mirror, that kind of thing that I've already mentioned. So that at the beginning, it's actually quite noisy because we're so sensitive to single photons. If some random photon comes from somewhere else, we're going to see it. And so there's a little bit of background noise. But we can do some tricks, often called coincidence processing or surface estimation, to say, well, I only got one point out here, but I got 20 points here. That means there's probably a surface here and not there. So we clean up the data, and then we say we can only scan the one region, but we scanned all over multiple times. We line those up. So that's called registration. And then we aggregate them all together. And then finally, we have the final products. And that could be the bare earth pulling back the trees, could be elevations, it could be how tall are your buildings there. And so this is the typical processing workflow, which is actually very computationally heavy when you think about a gigabyte per second of data and processing that. It's a lot. So here's another video kind of show and like visually walk you through that process of processing. So this is what I showed you. This is a raw data. You see there's lots of noise in and around everything. It's just one single scan of this area, but you see the information is there. Now the power lines are a little bit sparse. So what we do is to fill out the scene, we use multiple looks, multiple scans, but those scans have to be lined up together. So this is one of the denoised scans, and I'm going to lay on top another scan. And now it's a little bit off of each other because maybe there are some uncertainties, but in the registration, we take them and line them up and line them all up together. And now the features are more clear and they're aligned together, but it's still sparse. So we do this with all the scans. In this particular example, about 20 scans of 2 different passes. And you see now how everything just pops. And I'm only showing a small area, but this antenna here, you see all the struts very finely. And even coming in here, I love these entryways here that survive. So there's still actually a lot of development on the processing in the way it's done and how to speed it up. That's something I've been getting more into recently. So kind of going back to Google and comparing LiDAR versus other 3D kind of imaging. So the typical imaging that, say, Google's using for their 3D maps is called photogrammetry. And what that is basically kind of like stereoscopic vision where, you know, your left eye sees one thing, your right eye sees another, and you take both of those and you put them together, and that's how you have depth perception. So this does a pretty good job. However, in places where you don't have direct view, when the Google algorithm, so this is from, I don't know, 2014. I checked it recently again. It's still the same like this. In places where you can't really get a good photo, the street ends up all jagged and all over the place because it really just doesn't have all that information. And the other thing with like the trees and foliage, when you take a picture, you just see the green leaves of the trees and the branches that are hanging out. Yeah. So the major advantage of LiDAR is these 2 examples. So on the top, this is a point cloud based from just photos, and you're not seeing anything under the trees. But with LiDAR, because we're working with single photons, we can see, so this is an example I love. I don't know if any of you guys like hiking or being out in the woods, but even if you're in like a dense jungle in daytime, it's not pitch black at night. That's because sunlight gets through. So you have some leaves, and there's like, even if it's a little hole between the trees, there is some photons of light that make it down and also make it back up. And we can see those. And the other thing about like between buildings, what we call urban canyons, where it's very tight and narrow, it's only a small angle of view to see between, say, 2 very tall, close objects. With photogrammetry, you can't do that aligning of the image very well. But with LiDAR, again, since we can see down very narrow places, as long as there's not a shadow or occlusion, we can see down in between those places. And that's why when we do our collections, we scan either in circles or many lines to get what we call angular diversity to avoid any of those shadowing. So the last main thing that I'm going to go through is kind of going more in depth about what we call foliage penetration. So looking through the tree canopy. And this is kind of a toy model. So we have our airplane, we have our LiDAR system looking down, and there's a tree with a lot of branches. So I'm going to try to break down this graph on the right, and then we'll go through kind of different progression of it. So in the vertical dimension is the height of the tree. So say 0 is ground, and 5 meters up is the top of the tree. Now, say you were to take like a slice, a vertical slice out of the tree, what would you see? So if you were just to take a vertical slice and say how much light would be reflected, that's what this x-axis is, how much reflected light there would be from each one of those levels. So say this is at 5 meters is the top of the tree, and that's like a leaf that's pointed very near, to how the light will come in. You'll get a strong reflection. Say this at 4.5 meters as a branch, you won't get as strong as a reflection here. So that's why it's a little bit less on the x-axis. Now there's, say, another leaf that you'll get a strong reflection in another branch. And then there should be nothing if you're out on the branch side. And then there might be some bushes and then the ground. So that's what's going on in this graph. So this is kind of representing, like, physically what is there. And what we do is we're shining our laser light. And as I verbally kind of already said, some of that light is either it's blocked or reflected. And so if you start out with this much light, if you're just kind of thinking about how much are you shining, then you get less and less of that light that makes it all the way through to the ground. So you have less chance to see what's on the ground if there's more things above it. So if you were to, with our system, we know we're limited in time to our resolution, which is about 15 centimeters, say 20 centimeters full width half max of, is this a surface or not? So we're never going to see just a straight line. We're always going to see kind of a Gaussian distribution of when there's a surface. So this is the kind of backwards, starting with the answer in mind. This is the kind of thing you would tend to see. Now, what if we play our data onto a scene like this? So we're counting single photons. And so the end trials are going up, and the end detections is what we get back. And we're histogramming. So every time we get a photon, that's increasing on the x-axis here of a higher signal strength. And in our kind of simulated data here, the blue sections, you can see where, yeah, there's some peaks here, there's some noise here, there's some other peaks that stand out of the noise. And so the blue is actually what we're seeing. And then the smarts is what we're applying in our computer processing. So the coincidence processing to make sense of, okay, there's a strong signal return here. Are you a surface or are you noise? So that's what we do in the processing. And also we estimate the relative reflectivity. So if I shined light here, 2,000 pulses, and I get at most, so like the number 360 returns total, how are they distributed? This is how I can find out the relative reflectivity. And then also you have to keep track and tally of, well, if my light was blocked here because I got a return, that means it could have never made it down here. So it makes actually these signals that are down here in the ground actually more likely to be true than the other ones here. So that's the model and kind of the picture of how we do this foliage penetration to see past the trees. And I have just a couple more examples of this. This is from our company with our Cuchillo system. This is a nearby dam and a waterway and some power lines here that we thought was really interesting. And I hope you can see here across the trees, across the power lines, we're taking a transect here. And there's a lot of trees, and you can see all these individual points. It's I think about 10 centimeter width that we're looking at and taking a vertical transect. And you can see along here a very nice signature of the physical ground, like what's the dirt that's there. Mm-hmm. And you can see the tree branches, probably down here, these are more bushes that are closer to the ground. And you see a big gap with some points in the middle, and that's these power lines running through here. So this is a really powerful tool that a lot of people are interested in, this particular capability of LiDAR. And this is what really makes it stand out amongst other things like photogrammetry. So in almost closing, This is another video example. This is, again, the group at Lincoln Labs. And this is in Puerto Rico, and they're at 22,000 feet in the sky. The machete sensor, which is a big knife to cut through the trees. And here's a picture of the jungle here. I think it's a triple canopy. And probably you guys in the Philippines have a lot of thick jungles there too, I imagine. And the target area is 1 kilometer. And so this is done several passes and scanning this 1 kilometer and all registered up. What you see, the coloring here is colored by height. So this is a little river going through here. So that's why it's darker blue. And then the red is higher in Z, so more the top of the trees. So in this video, I'm going to do kind of an overview of the scene. You see this kind of river valley here, and it's just full of trees all around. Again, we're coloring by height here. So blue is lower and the red is the top of the trees. And other than the valley and the river down there, you don't really see much of what's going on. But we can do, again, what we call digitally deforest. So we pull back the trees and then it becomes obviously immediately apparent, wow, there's a big trail or roadway going through here that you didn't really see when you had the full level of trees there. And so now in the video, we're kind of following along that roadway and panning back around. And so instead of coloring just by height, we can also color by what we call height above ground. So we have a ground finding algorithm and then basically subtract out the ground and say how many from relative to the dirt from the ground, how high are objects above or not. And just to remind you, if you were to just take a picture, it would just look like treetops.
Yep.
But again, to pull back the trees to digitally deforest, now coloring by height above ground, you can start to see, are there interesting features here? And what's zoomed in here is a very planar flat structure, which in nature is not normally occurring to have a very flat, square, rectangular thing. And so a lot of use of this has been with the military to try to find nefarious activity happening in the jungle. For example, so
some diggings or
yeah, digging, illegal mining, drug labs, all this kind of stuff. Those people who think they are going to be hidden and not seen, they will go out into very thick canopies and jungles and do their nefarious activity. Well, with LiDAR, they're not hiding because we can see it very, very clearly with our ability to do foliage penetration. So in summary, some of the applications in this one that I just showed you right now help catch the bad guys, which, you know, everybody wants to be superheroes. So that's nice. We get to sort of be scientific superheroes. But other things, disaster recovery. So we've done some work, say, after hurricanes to go and scan an area. Like, I need to know where just things are. So like in the Haiti earthquake, also this early LiDAR system went down there and it was able to say, okay, in these areas that we can't get to with trucks, like tell us what's going on, if we can get there with supplies or not. And so in a very fast amount of time, we're able to fly and scan over the area and say, okay, yeah, this roadway is clear, but no, this one is blocked. So send the supplies this road, but send the support trucks to clear things up out this other way, or to monitor like, okay, where have the people gone? And so see where there's camps of people and know where to go find those people. So some other things, maybe these are the more common that you've heard of with LiDARs, finding ancient lost ruins. So like in Mexico and other places in South America, the Mayans, the Aztecs, there's been, I think, a lot of TV shows too about, oh, with LiDAR, we're able to see these ancient walls and this ancient pyramid here. So that's also really cool. on the flooding, so because we're able to see through the trees and find the ground underneath it, we can also do simulations of, okay, if this nearby dam or levee is to break, where would the water go and who would be in danger? And a lot of insurance companies care about that. Also for city planning, a lot of cities are actually hiring LiDAR to monitor or just make cool graphs of their cities. Something we have in mind, especially my boss has brought up that he would love to do is for urban planning, be able to take a very detailed LiDAR view of an area and be able to tell where there's stairs or ramps. And you know how Google Maps, you can say, okay, directions of car or walking or bike. Wouldn't it be great to say wheelchair accessible? Because not every place has it, and that can be very frustrating. So you can use LiDAR to say, yeah, this is a graduation, like you can go up there, it's not stepped. So that's something we would love to see in the future. Other things like architecture, so like things being built, you can monitor with LiDAR as they're being constructed. With some of the power lines I showed, that's a big concern. It's a very expensive market as well, maintaining power lines, because you don't want your trees and vegetations all growing onto your lines and knocking over poles or causing fires. And it's very expensive to either send out a physical person to go monitor them, or even to like send a drone out with cameras, or even LiDAR, because they only go so far and only have batteries life for so long, and you're still sending a person out there. And then another thing that we're kind of getting into, oh no, I went forward. Okay, is bird and drone tracking. So the last thing, startup life. It's been awesome and exciting to work in a small company, but doing incredible things. And of course, we work with partners, like we still work with Lincoln Labs, who are, doing all this crazy big stuff. This system that I showed a lot of data from, Cuchillo, we started in the middle of the pandemic to build it. And we said, okay, we're still going forward with this. And that it was hard with all the COVID restrictions and all of that, but we did it. And this is my boss here saying, is our system mechanically stable or not? And
Let me
him
stand
like,
on it.
yeah, literally not just standing, jumping on it. As well, this is my husband who does electronics. And so we were able to partner with my husband and have him do some of our electronic components. I've gotten to fly these systems on the plane, so it's been awesome. And I was never really an airplane geek before, but maybe I've become one now. And this is an old DC-3 and just love this. We had this chance to land in a grass field with this giant old plane. It was just awesome. So it's nice to work with a small, intimate team doing very technical things. And to remind you again and again and again, success is highly nonlinear. And in your life, as you keep going, these things adapt over time, even what you do well. I did terahertz well before. Now I'm doing LiDAR well. Who knows what it'll be in the future. And what the world needs will change, all of this. So be flexible with this, but keep finding for the overlap of these items. And lastly, I'll leave you with my contact information, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Again, shout out to the Optical Society, who's sponsored for me a lot of things like this in the past, pre-pandemic. They probably would have sent me there to the Philippines to be with you all face to face. So I miss those days. I have a few blogs on effective presentations. Hopefully this was one of them. And another big thing that I'm super big advocate of, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So that's all I got for you. Thank you so much. And looking forward, as I mentioned in the beginning, to the best part, which is the questions.
Yeah. We
All
actually
right.
have a bunch of questions. So we have a highly engaged audience with us right now. And but before we get to that, so we'll give Dr. Kim a couple of minutes to drink water and rest quite a bit before we get down to the main event. So the other main event. So I just like to share I'll just share my screen. JP, could you let me know when you guys can see my screen already? All right. So, by the way, Kim, we had a total of about 125 or 130 live participants today. So, yeah. So, I think like it's a combination of students and teachers who have joined us out today. Okay. So, for our PhilSci Hub community members and for those who are actually quite new to our organization, so we have been doing webinars or web events like this every Saturdays in the Philippines, usually at 10 in the morning. For the month of September, after this one, so on September 24th, I think this might be a Friday. We will be joined by Professor Chris John Mejia Pastor. He'll be talking about strategies on how to deliver virtual lectures. So this is very timely and relevant, in during the new normal mode of teaching during the pandemic. So this is part of the teacher training webinar series that PhilSci Hub is delivering to you in collaboration with the Foundation for the Upgrading of the Standard of Education, or FUSE. It's the academic foundation under the Lushotan Group of Companies, and also with Philippine Normal University, or PNU. So, and then on the 25th, a Saturday, we will be joined by Mr. Chris Argamino from De La Salle University Center for Instrumentation, or CFI. And then he'll talk about atomic and molecular spectroscopy for environmental research. So yeah, this time around, you'll get introduced to a modern analytical technique with specific, and he'll provide examples as to how that is used or applied in environmental research. End of the month, September 30th, we'll be joined by Professor Alphonse Jason Palgone from Philippine Normal University, and he'll talk about strategies for assessing STEM lessons or STEM teaching. So again, this is part of that training series that PhilSci Hub collaborated with FUSE and PNU. Okay, and then PhilSci Hub also recently collaborated with De La Salle University, and so Chris Argamino's talk is going to be the first offering out of this series of training courses. But then what follows after him, what follows after him, is actually a talk on the fundamentals of scanning electron microscopy. So it'll be delivered by Dr. Jose Esmerilla on October 9th of this year. And then on November 27th, Dr. Virgilio Ebajo will talk about nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy and its application for or in natural products research. And then December, we'll have Mr. Michael Arnante, and he'll talk about multi-species cytogenic analysis. And then we'll cap this training series with Dr. Ana Karen Lacerna, a very good friend of ours at PhilSci Hub and a member of PhilSci Hub. And she'll talk about liquid chromatography, instrumentation and applications in natural products research. So as we have always promised, we will, populate all of your Saturdays. So going on, and so yeah, we will have a bunch more events to be announced for the remainder of the year and for 2022. Okay, and then one very important thing then that we'd like to share with you is that we have a bunch of undergraduate interns who have been putting together short lecture videos trying to democratize, concepts in different areas where they are specializing in. So we call this STEM Bites. So this is like the weekly STEM education series of Filipino Science Hub. So these are all fourth-year undergraduate interns of Filipino Science Hub. So one very important thing that we'd also like to encourage students is that you don't have to wait up until you finish your degree before you start sharing the things that you've already learned and things that you're passionate about. So every Mondays, it's Bio Monday. So this is actually this will feature videos created by a group of biology majors from Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Every Tuesday is Chemistry Tidbits. This is delivered by Jason Alcano, who's from Central Mindanao State University from Bukidnon. Every Wednesday is Biochem for Dummies by Bella Fami from the University of the Philippines in Manila. So she'll talk about, some cool topics in biochemistry. Every Thursday is Biotech and Chill, and we feature Joshua Eason. So he'll talk about, topics related to biotechnology. And then every Sunday is called Bioturo. So we'll have Michael Lupak, and he will be sharing some very important tips in teaching biology topics at the high school level. So we have a jam-packed week, like with all these contents. All right, so Dr. Kim, are you ready for the for the Q&A? So
Absolutely.
we have a lot of questions. We gathered a lot of questions from Zoom and also from YouTube. And to start with, I can start with this one, JP. This is from this is Ma'am Michelle Maglikmot. So, good morning. So, I have seen airborne lidar used for disaster risk reduction work, hazard mapping here in the Philippines. What other industries or research fields use this kind of high resolution mapping output? And also wondering, how much noise do you contend with during processing?
Yeah, love it. I love that it's being used in the Philippines and that you know about it. It's awesome. For sure. I think I touched on the very end, like some of the other uses. There's a lot that can go into what you already mentioned, the risk reduction hazard mapping. So like finding floodplains, finding, loose earth or shifting earth. But the other kind of industries, for power lines, monitoring, how well, thinking about reducing risk, how likely are certain power lines going to get disconnected or not? We just had a hurricane here in the US, I don't know, a month ago in Louisiana, like so many people were without power for weeks because a main section of what supplied energy was down. So could they have known and prevented that ahead of time? With the high resolution, especially with the foliage penetration, the military surveillance is a really big deal. So with the noise, there is a lot of it, but the rule of thumb is kind of usually what we say. To say if a surface is real or not, we can put different thresholds on that. And often we work at, say, if we have 10 returns, say 10 photons, that we don't know if they were noise or signal. But if we have at least 10 of those, then we say, okay, it's likely a signal and we should keep it. So we're definitely open and thinking about what are ways to reduce the noise much earlier on, but there is just a physical limit of how these cameras work that we probably will always have to contend with.
All right. Okay. Moving on to the next question. So this is from Leslie Hawili. So I think the question is it advisable to use LiDAR in timber inventory? Does it also determine the volume of a tree, which is part of the data to be collected, and specifically in dense forests, for instance, in acquiring permit in a project? So it's a fairly loaded question.
Yeah, no, this is a really good point. And that's something I haven't mentioned is for the forestry industry, LiDAR's being used a little bit, but we've been getting more requests for that. So with LiDAR, you can learn two things. One is its physical geometry and shape. The other thing is the reflection. And so with these kind of two things, you can more clearly identify, oh, this is a pine tree, or this is a sycamore tree, this is a cypress. And a lot of people care about what are the different kinds of trees and things out there. There are some algorithms too that are, so I didn't mention this part at all, but a lot of machine learning in AI, they're starting to look to LiDAR data because it's just so rich in the information. And so there are some algorithms out there, at least identifying, yes, this is vegetation. And I think there are some people trying to identify with machine learning, yes, this is vegetation, and this is a pine tree, and this is something different. So I say that it's kind of a field on the cusp of becoming more mainstream. So it's still, I think, in its early stages. In terms of the volume of the tree, let's see, I'm not sure if you're referring to like the size of the tree or the volume of the forest. You can, I say, determine both of those, the size of individual trees as well as the size of, what's the extent that this forest goes. And in terms of permits, I don't know the rules in all different places, but usually if you have to need a permit to go into like a preserved area or something, there's a lot more freedom when you're not going in and touching, and you're not going to disturb the physical environment there. So with flying your system over, I think that would be much more accepted than sending people out there to trample and destroy the forest there.
So I guess this is a question coming from me, because like my imagination went crazy as you were talking about possibilities and applications of this. So I just have a question. So how far is this technology from like getting I'm thinking about miniaturization, because I think most of the examples would require either flying it on a plane or like using drones. But is there, I bet you guys like in your company have a line of sight in terms of how can we actually just like perhaps like plug this into like a post or something. Is there like how far is this technology from reaching that level of scale?
Yeah. The hard part is, I guess this is with many things, you start to save. So money is the issue.
Yeah.
That we have this very, advanced technology, and every time you make one, it's a special snowflake, just about. So each one is super expensive. Once you can kind of ramp up the ability to make, especially these cameras, in a more streamlined process, it's not until that happens that the cost will really come down, and then be able to be, a bigger quantity. So in that sense, I think the kind of how things are progressing, like our company and a few others out there, and especially other types of LiDAR, not single photon, but the linear mode, they're showing the great use of LiDAR data. And I think as the demand goes up, like, hey, we want more of this. Oh, wait, it's that expensive. No, we don't want it. There'll have to be some kind of give and take where, okay, let's invest in streamlining the process and then be able to put more of them out there.
Yeah, so kind of like in a chicken and egg parody, right?
It is.
That's like good. But when demand actually ramps like that high, then like people will work and will develop ways of commercializing these in a way like cost is actually going to be an issue. So, but yeah, no, we're actually crossing our fingers for this industry, because like with the plethora of applications that you shared earlier, these are really very critical activities, right? Ranging from safety all the way, down to like archaeological type of study. So yeah, this is very exciting, and I'm hoping that our audiences in the Philippines are also like appreciating that like though LiDAR may not have an extensive scope of applications in the Philippines, at least Dr. Kim has shown you, like the breadth of opportunities, like that, in which we can apply LiDAR. So, all right.
I'll add on that last bit, and thinking about how I just said, yeah, it's all super expensive. There are smaller things that I've explored. This is a whole nother side note, but LiDAR sensors that are able to measure, say, from right in front of you to 4 meters away. And there's particular sensors made by ST Microelectronics, and they're a worldwide company. So if anybody wants to start dabbling in LiDAR, I think that would be the first place to start. And it's like, I don't know, less than $10 or something to get a little LiDAR chip.
Oh, kind of like a demo kit.
Yeah, the whole demo is probably a little bit more expensive with the boards and all of this, but ST Microelectronics time of flight sensors.
Oh wow, yeah. And you know, like what's quite funny, I didn't really capture that question, but I think it came from YouTube. And so I guess like people are trying to imagine, you know, like I get really the applicability of this technology. And one even asked, like, you know, say if there's like a suspected, you know, like explosive device like in a particular building, would LiDAR be applicable or useful for locating, you know, like that type of device, you know, like I guess like they're trying to imagine what's the limit of detection, like how sensitive can this really be?
Yeah. Well, we can't see through walls unless we use a different frequency. So like radar, they're longer wavelength, and radio waves, they go straight through a wall. So radar would probably be better, but except you have a bigger wavelength, so you have less resolution spatially. So if you have a bomb that's like, I don't know, 20 centimeters big, with radar, it'll just be in the noise there. So if there's like any completely opaque surface,
Yeah.
then no. But if it's just kind of an obscured, you know, the trees or a net or, you know, something, but a little bit of light can get through, then we could see it.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Um, Next question. Yeah, so I guess like this question was already partly answered. So like Gabriel was asking if LiDAR has been applied in archaeological or in the study of paleontological sites. So I think
Yeah, our company, we haven't done that, but it is out there, and it is cool.
yep. And then question from Kurt Baldemero. So can it also pass through water?
Yeah, so this gets back into the physics of it.
Mhm.
So it depends on which wavelength you're working at. Typically, we're at about 1 micron wavelength, and that's strongly absorbed by water. And the further out you go in your wavelength, the more it's absorbed by water. However, if you change your wavelength to say 532, which is green, 532 nanometers, you can see through water. And this is actually called bathymetry. Bath, like referring to water. But basically it's LiDAR for looking through the water and being able to peer down and see the surface, the seafloor. So it is strong, you know, strongly absorbed. I don't think you're going to see the kilometer down of seafloor, but certainly you can. And if you're, there's a lot of concern with coasts and climate change and how coasts are changing. Bathymetry is perfect for that. You know, it's where the water's kind of shallow-ish, and you get really good imagery of, okay, here's dry land, here's where the water is. So really great question.
All right. JP, would you like?
Yep, I would just like to remind our audience here that you can always ask your questions live instead of us reading it for you, so that we can have a more interactive experience. But Miss Mary Day Neo put it in the chat box that they have watched LiDAR in National Geographic Channel to trace locations of ancient civilizations such as the lost city of Maya. Yeah. I think you've briefly touched on that earlier. Yep. And then
meron po bang gusto magtanong ng live? Feel free to raise your hand, your virtual hand.
Yes, raise your virtual hand. And I have Ma'am Michelle also mentioned that this LiDAR is also used. This is a ground-based LiDAR to monitor the air quality and in the Philippines.
Oh, there is in use.
Because I was thinking that you're doing it from high above, so you can always like bring it down and make it useful on the ground. So from Joffrey, so I have a question here from John Ryu, and I think he's willing to ask this question live. Is John around?
Great.
John is an electronics engineer, and
good morning.
He has a good question for Kim.
Morning.
Hi, John.
Hello. Good morning, ma'am. So I am an electronics engineer student, and I would like to know more about some applications of LiDAR mapping on simple projects. So my question is, how is it possible for self-driving devices to move according to the mapped images of the LiDAR sensor? And what programs or softwares can be used to process data from the LiDAR sensor to a microcontroller or a computer?
Nice questions. You notice I didn't talk at all about LiDAR for self-driving cars, when I think probably that's where a lot of people know about it. I'm kind of in the camp of Elon Musk, just so that I can say I think like Elon thinks. Where Elon, with the Tesla cars, he said, no, LiDAR, forget about it. Cameras. That's how Tesla self-driving cars work. So there's a lot of money being poured into LiDAR for self-driving cars, and it's not completely misplaced, but there's a lot of real-time processing. And I think that's why your second question is, what about processing on, little microchips? It's not an easy problem because you have so much light, and then also the uncertainty as well, and then processing it all in real time. Where cameras, there's been a longer history of development, and our eyes are like, so many people drive with just their two eyes and no other sensors. And okay, there's still accidents, but have been doing mostly fine. There is a lot of money going into self-driving cars with LiDAR, but I'm not sure about the near-term future of it. In the long term, I think, computers and processing will improve a lot. And the way we do LiDAR will improve. But it's something like with the car, you want to be certain that you're going to see the small child running in front of your car and be able to put the brakes on. And until you can be really sure of that, let's not go there. In terms of processing on, say, microchips, that's not something I've thought a lot about or have a lot of experience with. There is, so right now, most of our processing is done on a standard CPU. There are people working on using GPUs to do the processing, which is a lot more powerful, a lot faster. But yeah, maybe that's a problem you should pick up, John, about how do you put this processing onto a microchip.
So John, you have an assignment.
Yeah, and speaking of processing, the question from Jovinsa Chavez asks about typical turnaround time to process LiDAR data for a utility.
Yeah, so it depends on what quality you want out of it. So several of our systems, we have onboard processing to give you near real-time results, but it's not as good as quality as, say, a lot of the movies and things that I showed to you. So if you don't need to know 10 centimeters of resolution and perfect, all the noise is gone, if you don't need that and just a rough idea, like, did I even hit the ground? Like, did I aim in the right place? You can do that in near real time. Now, to make these beautiful maps and take lots of data and stitch it all together, it can be a while. So, yeah, I should have numbers off the top of my head. I think it was the first movie that I showed. It was a 1 kilometer circle, and it was 30 seconds of data. And I think it took about 30 minutes of processing. So
Not
kind
bad.
of 1 second to 1 minute for the final product.
It's not ridiculously long, I have to say, right?
For the amount of data, yeah. There's still room for improvement.
But I guess I see, for example, for disaster relief or for rescue operations where
Exactly.
time is of essence. So how fast, like what's the fastest turnaround time?
Yeah, with confidence and like pulling in lots of data, different look angles and stuff within a couple hours.
Okay.
We're involved with one system that's used by the military operationally, and usually within 5 or 6 hours, they have the final product and have learned information about the scene and are now going and doing whatever they're doing.
And the thing is, like, for the benefit of our audience, if the military is actually using this and they're fine with the turnaround time, then that's actually that's acceptable. That should be, industry standard, like, if I may say so.
They wait for the quality. Yeah.
Yep. Another question from Almario Cow. Amazing work you're doing on LiDAR. So do you have a real-time LiDAR set up to monitor a particular area, similar to radar? So perhaps like, stationary ones.
Yeah, the processing problem's the same. But with the kind of the new element of your question that you're raising to monitor a particular area, something we also do is called change detection. So say you map an area and then you map it again at a later time. It's kind of simple. You just do a difference. This minus this equals things that changed. The processing time, it depends on the quality and level of detail and the amount of noise you want to get rid of. But if you have those on kind of similar time scale, whatever that time scale is, it could be real time if you want to know, like, say, if things changed, like a car is like a meter long. If you don't need to know 10 centimeters and you just need to know like a meter of resolution, yeah, we could probably tell you if a car is moved or not. Or like have a stationary thing. This is fun to do, stationary, or even in the sky, and you keep scanning the same area. You can see cars, boats moving along. So yeah, those are things of interest. And kind of one of the application points that I jumped a little bit ahead of is monitoring birds or drones. So we're working on some of those projects right now for ground-based LiDAR to be able to track swarms of birds. And you can see if you can track a bird that's like 10 centimeters big. A big concern at airport safety is, like, say somebody comes in with a rogue drone, what are you going to do? And how do you even know it's there?
Yeah.
So this is definitely something we're thinking about. And getting back to the real-time thing, we are planning, but it feels a long way off, about improving our capability, moving from just CPUs to GPUs to make it closer to real-time processing.
All right. So, guys, like, the concerns about turnaround time and sensitivity is something that, the company that Kim is working for is like working really hard, to really optimize and establish. So it's a good thing, and I like, thank you for all your questions. It's very obvious that the audience is highly engaged. JP, do you have anyone planning to ask questions live?
Nope, not on my side, but yeah. And I think Kim's company is still quite young.
Yeah.
I understand that you just started last year, was it?
Yes, year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. Yeah.
So it's still like a long way to go.
Yeah. I've learned a lot in a very short amount of time too.
So Um, so Kim, like the question, this question from Joffrey de los Reyes is highly relevant, to the Philippines, like being at the Pacific Ring of Fire, right? So
Yep.
his question says this. So, good day. Thank you for a very interesting topic, Dr. Vischi. Is it possible to use LiDAR for determining possible ground deformation events, especially here in the Philippines where we have lots of volcanoes and considering a tectonically active setting to serve as an early warning signal? Thank you very much.
Yeah, two thoughts on this. One with the LiDAR, as I was mentioning before, the change detection, I think would be the most useful thing here. Ground deformation implies it was something before and now it's different and you'd like to know. So say if you set up, whether it be a ground-based monitoring or you fly by and scan, you can, at a regular time interval, whether it be every day or, once a week, once a month, and do the change detection like, oh, wait, things are changing here. We should be aware. The other thing, this is actually a friend of mine when I was in Pisa, was working with a company, and he was working with radar or radio frequency to monitor, say, tectonic activity. And these were stationary probes that were kind of set up around a certain area, and they measured, it was based on interferometry, so like the interference. And basically, if you have two things, if they're in a fixed position, they have a certain interference. But if their distance changes, their interference changes. And so that's with his company. I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but with radar, they're doing some things like this.
Yeah, because it's very important to have like long distance instruments set up on, let's say, around the volcano, because we have seen like Dr. Jeff and I are living in a province where there's a volcano, and during that time it erupted, I think 2 years ago. And what happened was all the instruments monitoring those volcanoes were destroyed, and we can actually see the actual footage of that volcano bursting and shutting down the equipment. So
Yeah.
Wow.
And the good thing about LiDAR is that I don't think you don't necessarily have to fly on top of the volcano, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
We have,
scan
like,
it, at an angle.
Yep.
And then okay. So I feel like so Kim,
There's so many questions actually here
there's a
in
lot of questions, and I think there are
Should I talk
students.
faster?
No, it's okay. I think there are students and teachers who are really trying to get a much better sense of how LiDAR is actually practiced. So this question just came in from Kurt Baldemero, and he asks, how much computing power do you need for the processing of LiDAR data, and what computers have you been using?
Yeah. So I'm not as much the computer person. I'm the one that's like, okay, I have a box I can use. Okay, I'll do my thing. So on a laptop, for the quick checks like I've been describing, you can process the data. So that's like the kind of near real time. But to put everything all together, so we have I'm going to be parroting words that I know, but maybe I don't know the full depth of, but we have a 2U server with like 32 CPUs with 10 gigs each, something like that. And that's what we use. So when I give the example of 30 seconds of data and 30 minutes of processing, that's the system I'm talking about.
So you need a setup for this.
Yeah.
So I guess using a desktop computer is not necessarily gonna make it.
cut it, yeah.
For some spot checks, it's fine.
Yeah. All right. Next.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions about like monitoring the vegetation in the area, because I think there's a couple of questions about like monitoring the biomass density over a certain place, and yeah, have you made some applications on this, Kim?
Yeah, so this is where it's related to the forestry question before, where a lot of
Yeah.
machine learning efforts are going in. And
Mhm.
myself and our company, we've been focused on more the hardware and like making sense of the physical data. And kind of our philosophy is, well, we're a few people anyway. It's like, okay, other people can think
You
about
take
that.
care of it.
That's a
Yeah.
hard problem. They can
Yeah.
think about that. But it's a huge open field. And if there are a lot of resources for getting into machine learning, like courses on Coursera or other
Mhm.
online things, and there might even be some LiDAR data sets out there if somebody wants to start trying.
Yeah, because
Own
somebody
machine.
asked about like open sources for LiDAR data. So
Yep.
yeah, that's definitely something that they can practice on.
Yeah, the first that's coming to mind, it's called Potree or Potry, Potree. And it's an online viewer and data source. There's many other government things that like the government's paid to have their land maps. So like here in the US, we have something called US 3DEP. So 3D, I forget even what the other letters stand for. But I think that's kind of data like the government has, and you can ask for it. There's one other thing. There's also, in terms of open source, other open source libraries for working with and processing point clouds. So there's PCL and PDAL. PCL is like Point Cloud Library for you computer people out there, and PDAL, I don't even remember what it stands for. But
Yeah,
those are
try
kind
to
of
search it.
the open source things that are out there to either process or access some data.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah, I'm
right.
trying to look for it, and yeah, I'm posting it here
Yeah.
for
So
everybody to check out.
yeah. So Kim, the next question is, I think, an indication that like our audiences are actually very interested in this area. So Rubelin Gutierrez she asked, is there a specific collaboration or extension project done with institutions? I guess perhaps internationally. It's yeah, not to limit it to just in the Philippines when it comes to lidar. So for example, I think perhaps we can rephrase this on the context, say, of your company or other companies working on lidar or developing lidar based technologies. Are there extension activities that are perhaps sources of opportunities for high school or college students and educators to get involved in?
Yeah, that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
I wish the answer was yes, LiDAR is everywhere. Just go
Yeah.
down the street and get one. And I am looking forward to that day.
Yep.
I can start with our company first. So we've done mostly work in the US and with US partners because these particular cameras we're working with are protected under ITAR regulations. Meaning, if you want to take this type of technology outside of the US, you need special permissions.
Yeah.
And we've worked with the military in South America with the deep forest and jungles, and we have special permission to operate down there. So wherever we go, with these kinds of cameras, we need special permission until that changes. Now, there are other types of LiDAR systems. I talked about single photon, which I think is better because you're just getting so much signal. But linear mode, you still get decent data, maybe from lower altitude, the same quality. But there's a linear mode company in Canada, Teledyne Optech. Regal is another really big one. They're out of Germany. And in terms of interest of where we've been asked to go, we have potential collaborators in South Africa that want to do forestry there. The Caribbean islands, which is like our neighbor. But in terms of Philippines, like we'd love to start any collaborations. And in terms of, what's more accessible, say at the high school level, the ST microelectronics time of flight sensors for me is just, that's the place to start. It's as a very entry level way to get into this.
All right. And then Kim, I guess in the interest of time, since we would like to not overlap with your with much of your like post midnight
It's okay. I love
plans
this.
or activities. Could you perhaps like give some advice to high school students or like who are aspiring to become applied physicists? So, what skills do they need to develop before or during their university studies? So, like from the high school level, transitioning to like a college major in applied physics. So, are there certain advices that you can give?
Yeah. With every field, I think being curious and asking questions. So what you're doing right now. The other thing with that, because that can be all head knowledge. I'm an experimentalist, so I'm very biased. And okay, you said specifically applied physics. Start experimenting. It could be any, little idea or a big thing. But just getting your mindset in like, the scientific method, like the scientific method is established and it's lasted for a good reason. You start with, a question, a fascination, I think is where everything should start with, like, wow, how does that work? Or why does it do that? And then like, maybe it's this.
Yeah.
And then testing the, maybe it's this and finding out, yeah, it is that. And then you're like, yeah, of course it's obvious. Or you find out, oh, but it's kind of this other thing. And just by going through that process, like over and over, I think that's like the best training you could have. And it doesn't have to be on technical things. I mean, it could be like, well, in the pandemic year, I started gardening. Like, how come, I don't know, why do my tomatoes taste bitter? And then find out from a neighbor, like, oh, you need to add calcium to your grounds. Like, okay.
Let me try that.
And now I don't even know if calcium's the right thing. But just as an example of, the trial and error and the questioning mindset and all of that, starting with a curiosity and a fascination. Related to 7 habits, which I think is another good like set of skills. 7 habits of highly effective people. It's not just like wake up, brush your teeth every day and, that kind of like, sleep on a regular schedule. Those are all like part of it. But the, in brief, because I think it is super essential and super good life skills. You start habit 1, habit 1, be proactive, realizing that not to be a passive victim, but to be bold, be brave, as kind of we already talked about before, and realize that you are an agent of change, that there is something you can do in nearly every situation, even if it's just changing your mindset without changing your, what you physically can do if you're constrained, that can set you free above whatever circumstances you're in. The second thing is begin with the end in mind. So like, you have a vision to be applied physicist. Like when you have a clear vision and goal, when you've said yes so strongly to this one thing, when somebody's like, hey, do you want to go do this other thing? You can very easily say, no, I'm doing this thing. Like I'm answering this fascinating question. No, I don't want to go to the beach with you. Although going to the beach is good and fun and fine. And like, I think should be part of life. But just in terms of like, being able to focus in and say yes to this and honing in. Then the next thing is putting first things first, your time management, your priorities. And just kind of relate to what I already said of when you have a clear vision, you have your priorities, like do the big things first. I don't know if you know the analogy of big rocks and little rocks and sand. So you have a jar, which is your life, you fill it with the sand first, all the little things. Then you fill it with the little stones, and then you have big rocks. Well, the big rocks can't fit in. But if you start with the big rocks, the most important things in your life, then you put the little stuff, and then there's even room for the sand. This is a balanced life. So that's a huge thing, a skill I would advise. And then that's all stuff about you personally becoming a strong, independent person. But no man is an island. We need to learn how to work with and communicate with other people. And that's kind of the other parts of the 7 habits. Thinking win-win, understanding somebody else before you tell them what you're thinking, and learning how to synergize, make the best of all of our elements. Like the 1 + 1 can be more than 2 when we find a new way to harmonize. So that's something, actually, that side of it's not really talked about a lot in science, like the social skills that go into it. And when I find people who are scientists that are like good human beings that know how to communicate clearly without, being upset or, being clear, like it's so refreshing, and we can live that way. So that's kind of my, in a nutshell, of, be fascinated and explore those questions, grow yourself, and learn how to interact with other people.
So yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, that is so insightful.
This all the more makes this, like a very effective career guidance talk, right? Because it's not all the glitz and glamour of getting your degrees and then forging a number of like very amazing career opportunities, but then like what goes beyond that, right? Like how you develop yourself as a person, like who actually carries, who soldiers on a particular journey. So it is thank you so much for the very generous sharing, Kim.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you guys for all the great questions and engagement, and I hope you all become LiDAR scientists.
Yeah, you know what? Like more people came in, like joined in, like I think towards the end, I think perhaps like some of our audience members, like or encourage some of their friends to dial in, because it's actually like a very great talk. And then I think JP.
Yeah, just a side note. There's actually a big project for DOST for LiDAR called Phil LiDAR. This is according to Marites. This is the main objective is for risk reduction, and the other one is for precision agriculture, soil survey mapping, forestry density mapping, and coral reef rapid assessment, and that is in collaboration with UPLB actually. So
okay, thank you so
our
much.
home university.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marites Mateo, who's always been a source of additional
Our
information
friendly
in all of
neighbor.
our sessions. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Phone a friend when you have questions and you need more information. You call Marites Mateo. JP.
Yep. So, as a token of appreciation, so Kim, we can only present to you a certificate. Hope we can give out like a Jollibee meal for you for everything. But in behalf of our team here at PhilSci Hub and of all the participants here on Zoom and on YouTube, we would like to present this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Kimberly Reichel-Vischi, a LiDAR scientist from 3DEO Inc., for delivering this webinar, 3D Mapping with Airborne Lidar, organized by the Filipino Science Hub and held via Zoom this 18th day of September. Signed Dr. Jeffrey Bungkin, CEO and founder, PhilSci Hub, and yours truly, Vice President, PhilSci Hub. And yeah, Kim, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You will have touched, like more than 130 lives today. And then the good thing about this is that some of our audience members were asking for a copy of the presentation. But like this webinar is recorded and it's uploaded on our YouTube channel. So you guys can just like go back and watch that. So Kim's contribution to the Philippine STEM educational sector is going to be immortalized
and it's up there
already. But like Kim, thank you so much. There's a bunch of messages of appreciation that poured in from YouTube and on Zoom as well, and like they're just quite amazed with Lidar, so they didn't know that this technology actually exists. And, you have opened up their minds and their imaginations to all the possibilities that, Lidar can bring to the society. And, I think also thank you so much for sharing your story, your very inspiring story, with our audience right now. So I bet like our physics teachers are now more energized to encourage their students to pursue a career in physics or applied physics, and also at the same time, those students. I think we have both high school and college level students participating in this session. So I think by now
Mhm.
they have their eye on LiDAR and perhaps, like a career as a physicist. So thank you so
Awesome.
much. Perhaps we can request, JP, we can request
Yep.
our audience members if we can have like a group photo.
I would love that.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
The Zoom selfie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, have you had such?
Yeah, we've had this for a long time already.
Apo, baka po pwede kaming
This photo
mag-request
op.
na, opo, baka po pwede kaming mag-request na ano po,
You
paki-turn on
turn on your cameras so we
cameras
can see your
for,
beautiful faces and
exactly.
take photos.
Oh,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
a
so
big deal
much
here.
better. I wish I could have seen your faces before.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to tell you guys too. I have banana ketchup here in
Oh,
I was gonna bring it out.
yeah, banana. And Kim, are you a fan of Jollibee as well?
Yes, there was one that opened in Houston. It was so good.
Oh,
Have you
there
been
are
there?
3 in Houston now.
Mm.
There are 3 branches in
There
Houston.
was just the one
Because
when I was
there's a
there.
lot of Filipinos here. So
All
and
right.
then I think you have that project was it Cuchillo or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, knife is cuchillo in the Philippines because
Yeah.
it's a Hispanic term, so
Spanish
Right.
term.
Yep.
everyone can relate to that. All right.
All right.
Okay. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. There are several panels here, so
Yeah.
just keep
So,
smiling.
So hold the smile.
All
get
right.
used to it, Kim.
All right. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
I love it.
All right. So thank you so
Mhm.
much, everyone, for dialing in and for joining us again for another Saturday filled with learning. So meron po ulit tayo next week. This one is with our De La Salle University speaker. So, and also on Friday next week, we have the speaker from Philippine Normal University, and he'll talk about strategies on how to deliver virtual lectures effectively. So, muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. JP, yung link ba sa ano
The link is posted now on the chat box.
Okay.
So I hope everybody saw it. It's also on YouTube.
Yep.
And yung po sa mga magtatanong po sa inyo if kung nasan po yung link, you can check out the recorded YouTube video.
Yep. And we'll also
It's on
post
the
it. Yeah, and we'll also post it on the Philsci Hub Facebook page. And
Yep.
then Kim, after this, we'll just have like a very quick debrief with Dendi, JP, and the
Yep.
rest of our team who are available.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I think Dendi will send you the link to the debriefing session.
Yep.
Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Kim, thank you so much again.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much, Kim. And
All
to all
right.
of our audience, maraming salamat po for tuning in. Makita-kita po tayo ulit next Saturday for another webinar. And we are really glad to see you today. And may you have a very nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Ingat po kayo. Bye.